Keith Pompey at Pompey on Sixers. Philadelphia Inquirer, Daily News, Philly.com, Locked On, Sixers podcast. He joins us now with a look at the Sixers and the Nets. As Keith, you saw 82 games. You were probably at about 90% of those games. Do we have any clear answers on what we learned about this team as they get ready for the playoffs?
Wow. Any clear answers? Joel Embiid's the best center in the league when healthy. I mean, that's about it.
Will they have him on Saturday?
Wow. I mean, I think they will. I mean, I honestly do. The thing is, I think that Elton Brand was being, he was just being honest with us, when he said, there's a possibility that he probably won't play. I mean, let's face it, he missed 14 of the last games, and they said he is trying to get himself, together to get ready for the game. So I think he will play, but I think that Elton was just, he wasn't coming out saying he's 100% going to play, and they are concerned.
Isn't it weird, though? Like, he randomly just played against the Bucks. Like, he was like, hey, I feel like playing. Like, isn't that odd? Like, if you try to read tea leaves, it's like he didn't play the 3 road games. Then they played the Bucks, and he was able to play. And then he plays well, of course, like he typically does. And then he just doesn't play the final 2 games because they're meaningless. But it's just odd that one game, they're like, let's just roll him out there.
Well, yeah, I think that Embiid is a big-time player. Like, what I mean is he gets up for the big games. It's national TV. I'm gonna go up against Giannis. I'm gonna put on a show, and I think that's what he does. Meaningless, but also, part of it is, he did play 2 games in a row, and I think, what happens is the recovery. Like, what happens, a couple days after you played? Is your knees? Is there swelling in the knee? Is there soreness? I think that's what the real thing is. But yeah, you're right. It just seems like whenever it's a huge game, he wants to play. And then afterwards, it's like, I think I'll pass.
Well, Keith, every game now in the NBA playoffs, even the first round, is a big game. There's no avoiding the big game feel of any game that they play. So do you think Joel will be more prone to push through any kind of tendinitis that he might have in the knee because it's the playoffs? And do you think the Sixers would use any opportunities, say they're up 3-0 on the Nets, to maybe sit him in a closeout game 4, thinking they got it in the bag and trying to give him some extra rest?
That's a great question. If it's a closeout, let's just say if they're up 3-0 and they feel as if, like, okay, based on what the other series is like, if it's one of those things where we could possibly just hurry up and get this clincher, I can see them playing, because then they're going to look at it like, we'll have 3 days, maybe 4 off, depending on what the other playoff series looks like. And then the thing is, if we rest them, what if we give them some momentum and they come back? Mm-hmm. Now, the one thing that is different from the regular season is, in these playoffs, they're going to play, let's say they're going to play on Saturday, and then they got an off day on Sunday, and they play again on Monday, and then they're off again until Thursday. So with that being said, they're looking at it like he'll have a day off, and he'll have 2 days off after the next game, as opposed to playing 3 games in 4 nights like they would in the NBA season. So there's going to be more recovery time. Mm-hmm. And at this time of the year, they really don't practice. NBA teams do not practice in the playoffs.
That's a good point. But I worry that if they were to make some kind of decision then to say, hey, we'll play, his knees pain is hurting him, but if we close this thing out in 4, we got a good week off maybe before we even have to play our next opponent, say Toronto. That's almost detrimental to Joel, too, because of his conditioning. That suffers when he's not playing nightly or practicing nightly. And we saw that last year. When his conditioning's not there, it becomes a liability.
Exactly. And that's the thing. That's why, you have to keep this guy active, because it just seems like, for whatever the reason, whenever he's not practicing, he just gets out of shape. He gains weight. It's one of those things that
sounds like me, Keith.
Yeah, but dude, I don't know, man. Like he was off for a week, and he came back at least 10 pounds heavier. You know what I mean? That's like, whoa.
Crazy.
So I mean, the thing is one of those things where, he just needs to, do a better job of dedicating himself to being conditioned. What they're saying is right now is that, oh yeah, he's working hard now, but was he working hard before?
Right.
So I mean, that's just how it is. But I mean, it's a tough situation, and unfortunately, it's a tough thing for the Sixers to be in, just because we all see the games and we all know how good Joel Embiid is. He's one of the top 5 players in the NBA, and he makes your team so much better. But right now, you're heading into a playoff that's really important, and we're all wondering about how successful is Embiid.
Keith Pompey.
How healthy he is.
Yeah, no problem, man. So if you're Brett Brown, after he's done snapping at you last night, and he's driving home, and he says, man, is Zaire Smith really in my rotation? Is Jonathan Smith in my rotation now? Like, does he have questions rattling through his mind on that drive home after what he saw the last 2 games?
I think he does. I think he really does. I mean, there's 2 things. Zaire Smith has played well, in the 2 games that he received extended minutes. And the one thing that really sticks out to me about Zaire is that, coming in, even though he was listed as a guard, he was a 6'2" power forward who always dunked the ball. And now this time off, he's developed a nice 3, and he's not scared to take it. The only question about Zaire Smith is something that this is why Brett Brown has to consider it, or question it, is, from the regular season to the playoff, the game goes up a notch. And here's a guy who only played in 5 or 6 NBA games. I believe it's 5. No, 6. He's only played in 6 NBA games. So it's going to be one of those things where, do I have enough confidence in him to do that? And then you look at Jonathan Simmons, on the other hand. Here's a guy, when he was at the Spurs, he was a lockdown defender. Whenever he came in, he produced, he scored a lot of points. But I'm looking at him, and I'm not 100% sure if he can fit into what I'm trying to do. But I'm looking at him these last 2 games with extended minutes. One game he had 14 points, 8 assists. The other game, he had a phenomenal game last night as well. So it's like, what do I do? What do I do? Who do I give the minutes to? And if you're Brett Brown, it's tough, because you look at Simmons, he knows how the tempo of playoff basketball. But he was out of your rotation, for a reason in your eyes. And then you look at Zaire Smith, and you're saying, man, I really like the way he plays D. I love his confidence. But is he going to be able to step up and play? Because let's face it, Markelle Fultz looked good the last 10 games of the season. In the final game of the season last year, he had a triple-double, right? And then in the game 2 against Miami Heat, he struggled mightily, and they couldn't use him anymore. He was rattled. So if I'm Brett Brown, that's why it's a long drive home. And maybe he's like thinking about, why did I hurt Keith's feelings? Did I embarrass Keith? Did I do this? I'm joking.
What about okay? So let's throw another guy. Did Monroe show anything, or is he just a veteran who's going to do his thing when he gets out there? Or do you say, nah, this guy legitimately showed that he might have a role?
He showed that he legitimately has a role. I mean, you look at Greg Monroe. Greg Monroe is, I remember when I first came into the league and Greg Monroe was playing for Detroit. And we used to always talk about how Greg Monroe and Andre Drummond used to dominate the Sixers. They were like the big twin towers. Well, next Joel Embiid comes along. Greg Monroe, he gambles on himself, and he takes a 1-year, a deal, and becomes a free agent and goes to Milwaukee. And next thing you know, he just falls out of the rotation, so to speak, right? But so I'm saying this to say that he is a bona fide player. He just gambled on himself, and he lost in a way, as far as, career-wise. So you look at him, and he's going to help the team, especially with Embiid. I mean, he's a skilled big man. His defense isn't like the best, but at the same time, that he's going to go in there and he's going to get you buckets. So, Greg Monroe is a guy that I think that, when he's talking about 3.5, maybe 4 guys coming off the bench, Greg Monroe, he may not play in every game, but I know that Brett has confidence in him to, come in when he needs something.
Keith, we heard Brett really talk about New Jersey. Here I go. Let's start over. Keith, we heard Brett Brown talk about the Nets and Brooklyn Nets' ability to be devastating off pick and rolls, their backcourt. Obviously, the Sixers have seen that this year. Do you think, from a rotation standpoint, as we talk about some of the guys who might and might not play, a lot of his decisions on rotations will factor in who can play the best defense, who can maneuver off the pick and rolls best right now, and that might be different for the second series or third series that they make it there. But for this series against the Nets, that will be kind of utmost importance.
Yeah, I agree, and that's when it goes down to with his Brett's term is horses for courses, and you look at a guy like Jonathan Simmons who's a pretty good defender in the pick and roll. Right. So it's one of those things where do I want to give him a look? Because, let's face it, if you're going to have to play the people that, are pretty good in a certain situation or going up against a certain type of offense or scheme, because if not, you could find yourself down in the series and, trying to avoid the panic button. So, I think that's what we're going to see. We're going to see, certain guys who are going to get some looks in this series who probably won't get looks, when they beat the Brooklyn Nets and go up against the Toronto Raptors.
Do you think that the Nets are a tougher matchup for the Sixers than maybe the Magic would have been?
Yeah, yes, I do.
Yeah, I agree.
And here's my reasoning. When you look at the Magic, a lot of people look at Vucevic and they're like, oh, he's always giving Embiid the business. Mm-hmm. Yeah, but it's kind of like one of those things where, he's scoring a lot of points, but are they really impacting the game? Mm-hmm. You know what I mean? He's just getting points, right? Well, when you have a team like Brooklyn, to me, you have Karis LeVert, you have Spencer Dinwiddie, and you have D'Angelo Russell. All 3 of these guys are the type of guards who get 30 points a game against the Sixers. They can create their own shot. They can shoot. They're just, guys who are tough to stop off the dribble. And you have 3 of them, not just one, but 3. And then you look at a guy like Joe Harris. He's not known for creating his own shot, but he's shooting 47% from 3, which leads the league. And they run the pick and roll. And, I think that right then and there, that is a tough matchup for the Sixers. But I think in the end, and the same thing would have happened with Orlando, the Sixers the bench is going to reduce for both teams. And next thing you know, the Sixers are just going to have a better 5 on the floor more often than not against the Brooklyn Nets, and that's going to enable them to win this series.
Well, they just saw them about 2 weeks ago. They dominated that matchup, and if the Sixers bring their defensive intensity, they should be able to get by Brooklyn, and it will be a good tune-up to get these 5 guys playing together for Toronto, who should be next. He's Keith Pompey at Pompey on Sixers, 2:30 Saturday, right here on 97.3 ESPN. Let's go, Ears.
Oh,
I beat you to the punch, man. I'll see you.
I know, right? All right, you got me. I can't even say anything.
Take care, man. All right, Sports Bash Live, 97.3 ESPN.